Connected Life Book Club, Season 3, Week 6.
This is it.
The final discussion on the couch for Shades of Light by Sharon Garlow Brown. I'm Summer. This is Candace. This book took a heavy turn this week.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. Like we ended last week's conversation being like, here's our hopes for the characters. Let's hope Casey gets saved and like all of the things. But we recognized that there was a crossroads we were at. Mm-hmm. And we will say, if for some reason you're watching this, like maybe on Facebook and you haven't finished the book yet, finish the book.
Do that first.
Come back.
Yeah.
Because there's
big spoilers.
Big spoilers.
I mean, it's the end of the book.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So Casey dies.
Dive right in here.
Let's just address that and throw it.
I'm not going to lie to you. It seems like, I mean, in reading through this book, so obviously she started the book basically in a mental hospital. And I remember her at that point saying things like, I don't even deserve to be here. I don't deserve to be sad. And boy, did she get some like reasons along the way. Oh my word.
Yeah.
Well, and like, but that's the funny thing is even after Casey dies, so she spends 6 weeks or so being kind of catatonic. And maybe it's because Sharon didn't like walk us through those, that it doesn't feel as sad as when like the cat died.
Right.
Remember when Theo died? And like, and I understand there's more symbolism there. There's more of a connection to her old life and happier times. And she had kind of had some falling outs with Casey, and she had understood that he was kind of toxic for her. But
well, I think I think that the difference between Theo and Casey, I mean, this whole book, she'd been really, especially in the beginning, Casey had been this thing that she'd lost, that she had glorified because of his absence. Like she was able to do that. And then when he came back and she was reminded of, oh, no, this isn't great. But the difference, I don't think so much was Casey and the cat. It was where she was at.
Right.
So coming out of the hospital, she didn't even think she was ready to leave the hospital when she left. And she was still so vulnerable and so in that place. But what we found between Theo and Casey even returning was that intentional healing with Kit and her mom and her work at the New Hope Retreat Center and all of that. She just was in a tenuous but stronger place than she had been.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that that's kind of what we were looking at last week, talking about like how in many ways Wren and Casey parallel each other as far as the struggles that they face medically, clinically, but they have very different reactions to it based on who and where they're at.
Right.
And so I think even Wren, from Theo to Casey, she was in a very different place, and it showed how similar stimuli, I mean, Casey was 1,000 times worse, but how that stimuli affected her maybe differently. I mean, again, she didn't dwell on what that 6 weeks really looked like. So, but she ended it in a different place.
Yeah, much different. And I think maybe we can save for the bigger podcast, the final podcast, you know, a little bit more diving into where their character development came from, or, you know, why they made the decisions they made. But we do have some personal questions that we are going to dive into. And these come from the group discussion guide for week 6 in the actual published discussion guide here. And so this one's number 2. What has been stirred in you this week through the characters' lives? Why and how do they mirror your own fears, hopes, and longings?
Well, I think I felt Jamie this week in the sense of like, I don't even think she was as big a character, but my concern for Wren reading of what happened to Casey, I felt like Jamie. I felt so worried that she was going to fall off. I felt so much pain. And I talked about last week, I even like Casey, but oh my gosh, Casey, you know, I mean, just
well, and that's totally how Jamie felt. I mean,
yeah,
and that's tough.
So I think I felt Jamie this week. But also, I mean, she saved it for the end, man. He's got a baby, he abandoned his family. He's got like all of these huge things. We were wondering like what really went on with Brooke. What was that story? And like that came to a head, and it's just like, what a week. There was so much. that stirred through the characters' lives. I mean, everything happened. I don't know. How would you answer this?
I mean, it's kind of hard because when I think about my own fears, hopes, and longings, I don't know if I can specifically reflect on, I mean, mirror anything in the book. I mean, I think that I've heard people say before, like, God giving me cancer was the best thing that he ever did for our relationship. And that, you know, some sort of like huge hardship, major trial brings people so close to God. And I guess that is a longing that I have, to be so close to God, like in the way that Wren has found peace in Christ and has connected with him in such a way that feels so personal and so real. And I think that I connect with God and I connect with Jesus in certain ways, but when it comes to like his suffering on the cross, it's like I am a little bit more at arm's reach. And she even talked to Mara about you know, how the depiction of Christ's journey to the cross was so gory and so hard to look at, but she also said that it was so beautiful, and just kind of found a connection to Jesus in his suffering in those moments. And so I guess I do long for a deeper connection to Christ in that way, which of course, careful what you pray for, because right?
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, it is a good reminder to look at the reality of Christ's life and death and what that really looks like for us as a human race, and how we would have endured that, and the strength that comes from that, I think is really, really important and really beautiful.
And I think for me, I guess if I were to have to go back to like hopes and fears and longings, like how it mirrored the characters this week, I guess I do really understand how Wren was struggling after the fact, needing to know.
Oh my word, yeah.
Was this an accident? Was this on purpose? Where was he with God? That was the big... a good friend of mine recently passed away in the last couple weeks, and I just got some roundabout confirmation from his sister that it was likely suicide. Wow. And no one was saying anything, but it's looking like that's what it was. And so just, you know, you go back and you pick apart every conversation you'd ever had about God, and you think about their life, and you wonder, like, and you pray that you'll see him again. And just, I think for her, and that seeing where he was at in the chapel at the end of that last week's study, and just that hope of like, okay, this is where Casey's really at with God. Casey feels like God couldn't love him. God couldn't accept him, couldn't forgive him. And maybe there was this opening, and maybe he was going home to his kid, and maybe he was going to take responsibility, and maybe this was an accident, and maybe it wasn't. But that maybe hanging over her head for the rest of her life, and not knowing, and like trusting God, but also not knowing in the most significant relationship of her life, what those details were. I sympathize with that, because I've been there more often than I would like. And so I think that is a fear, a longing, a hope that I can mirror this week.
Well, and it is interesting because I think that his note that he left to her, which she's going, is this a suicide note? Is this a goodbye note? Is this, and she's picking apart every single word that he wrote down. And I think that even gives a interesting peek into where his heart was, because he specifically talks about kind of the Stations of the Cross, you know, the story of the persecution and the crucifixion of Christ. And, you know, when you paint a rooster, think of me. And when you know, and all of these things that relate directly to Christ's suffering. And so he was obviously dwelling there more than he even let on, you know, and he was telling Wren about that, and kind of, I'd say giving her some answers in that.
Do you think it was an accident?
No, I think he killed himself.
And it's so hard, Sharon Garlow Brown, that you have done this to us, because I that's where I feel Wren, because again, like, think of a rooster, and what do you mean? Do you mean this, that, the other thing? But it's like where I I don't know that he started heading toward the family he abandoned initially with the idea that he was going to kill himself. But I also know, like, with depression and all of that and everything he was under, he might have wanted to go home and on the way had another episode.
Oh, I mean, just totally. And when I say that I feel pretty certain. When I say that with the certainty that I do feel, I think that it's not probably the intention he set out with. I think that he had this duplicity going on inside of him. Yeah. You know, I mean, he was bipolar, and I think that he was hitting some high highs and like thinking about Jesus and thinking about Christ, and then hitting these low lows of like, why am I even bothering? And so, but in the moment before the accident, I think his intention was to end his life. And now whether or not he had been thinking about that the whole time, it's been something in the back of his mind. It's been something that
when he wrote the note,
right,
which he can't interpret anyway. Yeah.
Right. And you know what? She even said, I don't even know if Casey could give us the answers.
Yeah.
And I think that is more true than anything. And it's so funny because I have always had that kind of same mentality of we're not going to know the answer. You know, when you've lost somebody, you don't have the direct face-to-face contact ability to get the answers. But for whatever reason, at the end of this book, I felt more closure about Casey's character than if he would have stayed alive.
Yeah. And I agree with you. Like, even if it was totally intentional and he killed himself, I still feel like there was more hope for him in that last moment in the chapel. Like, I feel like more hopeful for his soul, even if it was that he chose to take his life, than I did when he entered the picture. Because I think that's something that the church is also, and I have to be careful saying this because maybe this is a sore spot for some people, but I feel like there's less conversation that I've heard as an adult member of the church than I heard as a child member of the church, when it used to be, if you chose to take your own life, that was it, you're going to hell. And I feel like we don't necessarily believe that anymore, because I think we're starting to see mental illness as mental illness. And I have to hope and I have to believe, and I look at the people that I've lost and know where they were, and we don't know. But I feel like it's a
theological rabbit trail.
And that's where it's like, that's where I have to be careful, because people are going to come down and defend different sides of that. But I think seeing mental illness as mental illness, and I believe that God hurts for us when we hurt because he understands where our heart is at. And so I believe that wherever Casey was at when he's questioning God, and even when he's angry with God, God sees that. And so I think that even if it was intentional, it doesn't mean necessarily that he's not in heaven and that Wren won't see him someday. And I just think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't think that at all. Actually, that never crossed my mind.
When I was younger, I feel like that was a conversation I'd heard from people, that was a thing, but I don't believe that.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely heard that theory and heard that, that's kind of one of the unforgivable sins. But again, a theological rabbit trail. Okay, here are my questions. So we'll do question 3. How was wait, did we do this one?
No, we did this. We kind of talked about this last week.
We did it last week. So how has your vision of Jesus been influenced by your journey with these characters? And what practices can you carry forward that help you keep company with him?
I think this book has opened my eyes more to the suffering of Christ, and not just the long suffering of Christ, like his patience for me when I screw up. But I feel like the very real pain and suffering of Christ in his life, we touch on at Easter to help us like get into that somber mood, but it's not something I think we fully appreciate or understand. I feel like the Bible stories, even the Stations of the Cross, like they've become so rote to us, and we write children's books about it and everything, and that it's just another Bible story. When if you really understand what he suffered and the betrayal emotionally, not just physically, that he endured during that season, I think this book has helped me reconnect to the pain and suffering of our Savior and his ability to sympathize when we are in that place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's kind of the message. Even the hopeful messages that they're talking about in ways that they're connecting with Christ, are through his suffering, you know? And I agree. That's not something that I spent a lot of time meditating on, but it can be so beneficial. And I think even as we're coming into different seasons of our life, to see how Jesus lived through those, because that was the purpose of Jesus, God's only son, coming to earth, was to have the human experience so that he can empathize with us. And there's bits of that, there's moments of that all throughout the Bible. And so looking for those when I'm struggling, I think is something that a practice that I will take forward, you know, because a lot of times I'll do the Google anxiety in the Bible, and then, you know, look up all the verses. Oh, God talks about worry, you know, but to actually see Jesus's experience and how Jesus prayed through those moments, how he lived his life through those moments can be really, really helpful.
And not even just Jesus, but if you look at Elijah, King David, etc., and enter into the suffering of the people that God chose. Being chosen by God, being used and usable by God does not in any way exclude you from pain, and just recognizing
if anything, the opposite, to be honest.
And practicing not glossing over that. Because I think we know the story. Oh, King David's son died. Oh, this happened. And Elijah was struggling and he took a nap for a couple of days. But really viewing that in a fair, realistic way and reading between the lines. And I think it's going there is what this book has helped me to do.
Yeah. So this question I think is really interesting, and it says, what next step do you hope the characters make? I'll just hold it there for now.
Okay, so for Wren, I hope that she is able to keep a grip on the improvements she's made, the progress she's made, her hopefulness, and all of the steps she's made, because was the fear. The first thought I had when Casey died was, what's this going to mean for Wren?
Right.
And so holding on to that, and we know that she's going to go through this again. That's the nature of this disease. But just hoping that it looks different, hoping that she is able to keep that line of communication and that relationship open with Hannah and Kit and those that she is connected with. I hope that her and Jamie are able to, I don't even know what that's going to look like. Maybe once they're in a healthy place, sit down and almost establish some expectations, some rules. I don't know what that's going to look like for when this season comes. This is what it needs to look like. Here's the role I'm going to play. Here's how hard I'm going to push. I don't know.
Is that the right answer?
I don't know.
I mean, we didn't really get any sort of closure with Wren and Jamie. I mean, even Jamie's, relationship to the situation. There are definitely times where I was like, Jamie, just go.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand respecting boundaries, but also as a mother child, even as a grown child, I don't know. I think Dylan said it at the beginning of the book. He said, just go. You know?
And I think expressing hey, next time you're in that place, I'm just going to go. And because I think that she was trying to communicate and dialogue with this very sick, catatonic Wren about what should happen. Girl, her opinion at this point, you don't want to offset any progress, but she's not in her right mind. At some point you just need, and so if you have that, hey, remember we discussed that this is what was going to happen. I don't know what the answer is, but I just hope that there is some sort of moving forward in that relationship, and maybe there never is. I'm a mom, I don't think it's ever going to be clean and pretty and easy. So I don't know. And I hope Kit writes her book.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do. I mean,
I'd read it.
she almost seems just like the wise, angelic type character. I kind of almost appreciate that she had that moment where she was mad at Wren for leaving and then not calling or leaving a note or whatever, and she just kind of came home and Wren wasn't there. And I appreciate that there was some frustration there, because Kit was almost becoming a character that was perfect
and unrelatable.
Right always gentle and forgiving, and those are all really good things. As I'm saying them, I'm we should all try to be gentle and forgiving. And that's where the Jamie comes out and is figure it out, kid. And just to all of her kids. I could see her saying that. and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough.
What are the next steps you hope that they make?
So I hope that Wren is able to get into social work again. And maybe not necessarily social work in itself, but some sort of like service, some sort of like empathizing with people and helping people. I mean, she has such a heart for it. And I totally understand how, that is so much to take on her fragile psyche. And, social work itself might not be the right situation or the right job for her, but to have some sort of way where she can kind of like come alongside others, just like Kit had a mental breakdown and then came alongside Wren to pass on some of that. I hope Mara moves to Texas, to be perfectly honest. There are homeless shelters in Texas, Mara. You can be helpful everywhere. Like, go be with your grandkids. Sorry.
I forgot about Mara. I wasn't even thinking about Mara.
I did not forget about Mara. She was my favorite character.
Out of here, Mara. Go to Texas.
Literally. I mean, even the way that, like, the fact that Casey talked to Mara and that Casey, like, was staying at the shelter, that I felt like was kind of an interesting tie-in and helped open up the door for Wren to see, oh, Casey's been lying. Casey's been lying to me. Casey's been lying to Mara. Casey's been lying about a lot of stuff, and kind of gave her a better image of Casey and the true person that he was. Yeah, I think that I want Hannah and Kit to be best friends. I think that I want Jamie to feel less guilt. Like, I hope at some point she's able to kind of come to terms, or at least like release a lot of the guilt that she's carrying about Wren's situation, about how present she's able to be. I mean, she's got like 1 million kids and like, all right, not 1 million.
She's got like 4.
You're right. She's got 4 kids. It feels like 1 million when she's like on the phone with Wren and Phoebe's asking her this and Olivia says this and Joel's coming in and Joel's out in the backyard like, and like, it just, obviously, I'm sure if you're a mother of many children, you understand. But yeah, I hope that she finds some peace in that and lets go of the guilt.
Well, I really hope that, and this sounds so bad, I hope that with Casey gone, Wren's healing is able to be to a higher degree, because I feel like he was a weight that was holding her back, and he was this tie to her past and this codependent relationship and always worrying about him and his healing. I hope she's able to focus on really getting better herself, and then that may help Jamie. I don't know. You just hope for everyone lives happily ever after. I mean, like, what else would you hope for the characters?
I mean, but even the way that when Wren was talking about, being a godmother to little Estelle and stalking Brooke on Facebook. Yeah. Also, the way that she describes Brooke is so sassy. I mean, I get it, but also like, there she is posting selfies at the funeral, and I'm like, ooh, there's a little fire behind that. Yeah. I mean, she can grieve however she wants, but the fact that Wren was obviously disapproving of how she was grieving, and even like, oh my word, just got word from the police. We miss our favorite guy, and wow, can't believe this accident happened. Like, the way that she just paints Brooke as this like kind of vapid, like, doesn't really get it.
She didn't have the connection with Casey that I did. No, I mean, and I hope that in time she steps off. I understand the temptation. Like, again, because I've been there in these kind of relations. Like, I understand, and social media allows that kind of trolling, like, for sure. So I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But I hope that everyone just lives happily ever after.
Wouldn't that be nice?
In a healthy, totally copacetic way.
So then the rest of this question actually says, what next steps do you hope to make individually and as a group? So the characters are making next steps. We kind of predicted that. What next steps can we make?
I want to continue viewing scripture in a fair, realistic, and balanced way when it comes to not just Bible stories, but really finding like the suffering or the joy and the hope, and like finding, like entering into those stories in a way that I felt like this book encouraged me to do.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to answer this question. You go.
Well, I think for me, probably every time that like Kit sat down to pray at night, you know, and she would invite Wren to join her. She'd invite Jamie to join her, and the way that Jamie kind of prayed continuously throughout her day. And, you know, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief, and just kind of having that mantra to a certain extent, you know, repeating that verse over and over. Those are some of the things that I'd like to work into my own life, you know, just a more constant prayer life, and to have that that familiarity with stepping into prayer as if it is just the way that Kit sits down, lights a candle, the way that it is her daily meeting time with God. And that doesn't even count the times when she's studying God's word, and the time when she's reaching out and having, you know, discipleship with people and leading and guiding them, but just time to sit down and talk to God. And I think making that a meeting and not just end of the day, check, but it felt as though she was really pouring her whole heart in every single day. And I think that's something I need to be more intentional about.
No, yeah, that was good. I like that.
Yeah. Kind of a wild card this last week.
There were no bows. We were so afraid there wasn't going to be any bows. There were no bows. But I guess that's life. Life doesn't come with bows.
Right. There were sunflowers.
There were sunflowers. There was a rooster.
There's a rooster.
There was no bows. So this is our final couch podcast for this book. I hope that you've enjoyed this bummer book, as it will forever be known because of Candace. But anyways, we have one more podcast coming. It's our final podcast where we're going to, I guess, we don't know what we're going to say because I feel like we covered a lot of it, but we're going to talk even more about the book as a whole, and we're going to have a chance to talk with Sharon Garlow Brown. So we are going to be releasing that, if all goes according to plan, a week from today. So join with us, share your friends, share with your friends, tell your friends about the book, and I hope it's been a blessing to you. Thanks so much. ConnectedLifeBookClub.com.
Yep, you're welcome to sign up at any point in time. So even if you're just stumbling across this and you're like, oh no, it's over. No. We're here, always waiting for you, so feel free to join whenever you want. ConnectedLifeBookClub.com. And you can always stream our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and however you stream podcasts on Google devices.
Yeah. You guys. Thank you so much for joining with us.